Hi everyone, I'm Victoria Sterling, and today I'm sharing the most personal story of my life, how I discovered my husband's affair and made him pay the ultimate price. This isn't just about revenge, it's about justice, survival, and taking back control when everything you believed in crumbles around you. 3 years ago, I was living what I thought was the perfect life. My husband Richard and I had been married for 8 years. We lived in a beautiful penthouse in Manhattan, owned 3 successful restaurants, and had just celebrated our business hitting 10 million in annual revenue. Richard was charming, successful, and everyone said we were the perfect power couple. But perfect lives, as I learned, are often built on perfect lies. It started with small things that I chose to ignore. Richard working late more often, mysterious phone calls he'd take in private, new cologne that smelled different from his usual scent. When you love someone, you make excuses for them. You tell yourself they're just stressed, working hard, going through a phase. You convince yourself that your intuition is wrong because facing the truth would shatter everything you've built. The first real sign came on a Tuesday evening in March. Richard said he was meeting investors for our 4th restaurant location. He'd been talking about expanding to Chicago for months, so when he said he'd be out until late discussing lease agreements, I believed him. I even packed him a late dinner and kissed him goodbye, telling him how proud I was of his dedication to our business. But something felt off that night. Maybe it was the way he avoided eye contact when he kissed me goodbye, or how he seemed nervous rather than excited about this supposed big meeting. I found myself unable to concentrate on anything. I tried reading, watching Netflix, even reorganizing our walk-in closet, but nothing worked. Finally, around midnight, I decided to surprise him by bringing coffee to wherever he was meeting these investors. I called his phone, but it went straight to voicemail. I tried calling Marcus, his business partner, thinking maybe he'd know where the meeting was happening. Marcus answered on the second ring, sounding confused. "Victoria? Is everything okay? Why are you calling so late?" "I'm trying to find Richard. He's in that investor meeting for the Chicago location, but I can't reach him." There was a long pause. Too long. "Victoria, what investor meeting? We don't have any meetings scheduled this week. And honestly, we haven't seriously looked at Chicago in months. The numbers didn't work out." My heart stopped. I felt like someone had punched me in the chest and all the air had left my lungs. "Are you sure? He left 3 hours ago saying he was meeting with investors about Chicago." "I'm positive." "Victoria, I think you need to sit down. Is Richard cheating on you?" I hung up the phone and sat in our kitchen, staring at the coffee I prepared for him, watching it grow cold. 8 years of marriage, 3 years of building a business together, and he was somewhere else, with someone else, lying to my face. But I'm not the type of woman who falls apart. I'm not the type who confronts immediately or makes emotional decisions. I'm strategic. I'm patient. And I'm thorough. Over the next 2 weeks, I became a detective in my own life. I installed tracking software on our shared computer when Richard was in the shower. I started paying attention to our credit card statements, which I'd always left to him to manage. I followed him twice, staying far enough back that he wouldn't notice me. What I discovered was worse than I'd imagined. Her name was Ashley Chen, and she was 26 years old. She worked as a marketing coordinator at a tech startup downtown. She was beautiful in that effortless way that young women often are: long black hair, perfect skin, bright smile in every photo I found of her on social media. She looked nothing like me, which somehow made it hurt more. But the worst part wasn't that Richard was sleeping with her. The worst part was how long it had been going on, and how serious it had become. I found hotel receipts dating back 14 months. 14 months. More than a year of lies, of him coming home to me after being with her, of him making love to me while thinking about someone else. I found jewelry purchases I'd never seen, a Tiffany bracelet, expensive earrings, a necklace that cost more than most people's rent. I found text messages that made me physically sick. Not just sexual messages, though there were plenty of those, but messages about their future together. Richard talking about leaving me, about how he was just waiting for the right time. Ashley asking when they could stop hiding, when she could stop being a secret. In one message, Richard wrote, Once the business is more stable and I figure out the financial situation with Victoria, we can be together properly. I promise you won't have to wait much longer. The financial situation with Victoria. As if I was just an obstacle to his happiness, a financial burden he needed to calculate and manage. But the message that destroyed me completely was one where Ashley asked if he ever felt guilty about lying to me, and Richard responded, Victoria's smart about business, but she's naive about everything else. She believes whatever I tell her. Honestly, it's been easier than I expected. I sat in my car in a parking garage, reading these messages on his phone while he was in a meeting, and I cried until I couldn't breathe. Not just because of the betrayal, but because of how stupid he thought I was. How disposable. How easy to deceive. That's when I decided he was going to learn exactly how smart I really was. I didn't confront him that night, or the next night, or even the next week. Instead, I started planning. I consulted with 3 different divorce attorneys, learning about asset division, business ownership, and prenuptial agreements. I spoke with our accountant about business valuations and tax implications. I even hired a private investigator to document everything properly. But more importantly, I started paying attention to our business in ways I never had before. Richard handled most of the day-to-day operations while I focused on the creative side, menu development, interior design, marketing strategy. I trusted him with the finances, the vendor relationships, the legal contracts. It was a good partnership, or so I thought. As I dug deeper into our business records, I discovered that Richard's betrayal extended far beyond just personal infidelity. He'd been betraying our business partnership too. Our 3 restaurants were profitable, but not as profitable as they should have been. Richard had been skimming money from the business for over 2 years. Not huge amounts that would be immediately obvious, but consistent amounts that added up to nearly $200,000. Money that should have been reinvested in the business, or saved for expansion, or shared between us as owners. Money he'd been using to fund his lifestyle with Ashley. I found evidence that he'd been inflating supplier costs and pocketing the difference. He'd been reporting lower cash sales than we actually had. He'd even been charging personal expenses to the business, dinners with Ashley, weekend trips, gifts for her. But the worst discovery was a business loan application I found in his desk drawer. Richard had been planning to use our restaurants as collateral for a loan to start a new business. A business that would be in his name only, with Ashley listed as a co-founder. He was planning to steal our life's work to build a new life with his mistress. That's when I realized that simple divorce wasn't enough. This required something more comprehensive. More permanent. More devastating. I spent 3 months preparing my strategy. I documented everything, the affair, the financial theft, the business plans, all of it. I copied every relevant document, saved every text message, recorded phone calls where legally possible. I built a case that would not only destroy Richard personally but professionally as well. I also started making my own preparations. I opened individual bank accounts that Richard didn't know about. I started moving money that was legally mine, carefully and gradually, so it wouldn't be obvious. I consulted with business attorneys about protecting my interests in our restaurants. Most importantly, I started building relationships with our key employees, suppliers, and investors. I began positioning myself as the real operational leader of our business, attending meetings I'd previously left to Richard, getting more involved in day-to-day decisions. I was preparing for war, and Richard had no idea. The plan I developed was elegant in its simplicity. I would expose everything at once, in a way that would maximize the damage to Richard while protecting myself and our business. I chose the night of our 8th wedding anniversary to execute it. Richard had planned what he thought was a romantic evening, dinner at our flagship restaurant, followed by a weekend trip to the Hamptons. He'd even bought me an expensive necklace, probably feeling guilty about his double life. He was being extra attentive, extra loving, probably because he was planning to leave me soon and wanted to ease his conscience. During dinner, surrounded by the staff and customers of the restaurant we'd built together, I stood up and asked for everyone's attention. Richard looked confused but smiled, probably thinking I was going to give some sweet anniversary speech. 8 years ago, I married the man I thought was my soulmate and business partner. I began. Tonight, I want to share with everyone what I've learned about trust, partnership, and betrayal. Richard's face went pale. He started to stand up, but I gestured for him to sit down. For the past 14 months, my husband has been having an affair with a woman named Ashley Chen. He's been using money stolen from our business to fund this relationship. He's been lying to me, to our employees, to our investors, and to all of you. The restaurant went completely silent. You could hear the kitchen staff stop cooking. Richard has stolen nearly $200,000 from our business. He's been planning to use our restaurants as collateral for a loan to start a new business with his mistress. He's been planning to abandon everything we've built together. I pulled out a folder of documents and placed them on the table in front of him. These are copies of bank records, text messages, emails, and business documents that prove everything I've just said. I've already provided copies to our investors, our accountant, and my attorney. Richard finally found his voice. Victoria, we can discuss this privately. This isn't the place, Dash. This is exactly the place, I interrupted. These people trusted you. They invested their money, their time, their careers in what they thought was an honest business. They deserve to know who you really are. I turned to address the room again. Effective immediately, I'm taking full operational control of all 3 restaurants. Richard Sterling is no longer authorized to make any business decisions, access any business accounts, or represent our company in any capacity. The legal groundwork I'd laid over the previous months made this possible. Because of how our business was structured, and because of the evidence of his financial theft, I had the legal authority to remove him from operations pending a full investigation. But I wasn't done. I've also filed for divorce, and I've reported the embezzlement to the police. Richard, you have stolen from our business, betrayed our marriage, and lied to everyone who trusted you. Now you're going to face the consequences. Richard stood up, his face red with anger and humiliation. You can't do this, Victoria. You're destroying everything we've built. No, Richard. You destroyed everything we built. I'm just making sure everyone knows it. He stormed out of the restaurant, leaving me standing there with a room full of shocked employees and customers. But instead of the awkward silence I expected, something amazing happened. Marcus, our business partner, started clapping. Then our head chef joined in. Then our servers, our investors, even some of the customers. They were applauding me for having the courage to expose the truth and protect the business they all cared about. That night, I went home alone to our penthouse. Poured myself a glass of wine, and felt something I hadn't felt in over a year: peace. The next few months were complicated, but everything unfolded exactly as I'd planned. The police investigation confirmed the embezzlement, and Richard was charged with theft and fraud. The evidence was overwhelming: bank records, forged documents, falsified reports. He eventually pleaded guilty to avoid a longer sentence, but he still spent 8 months in prison. The divorce was messy, but I was prepared for that. Because of the prenuptial agreement we'd signed, and because of his criminal activity, I was able to keep full control of our restaurants and most of our assets. Richard walked away with almost nothing. Ashley, his mistress, disappeared from his life the moment the scandal broke. Apparently, she wasn't interested in dating a broke, unemployed convicted felon. She blocked his number, moved to a different city, and started dating someone else within 3 months. The business not only survived but thrived. Without Richard's skimming and mismanagement, our profits increased dramatically. I hired a new general manager, promoted several key employees, and opened the 4th location Richard had been lying about for months. Most importantly, I learned something about myself. I learned that I'm stronger than I ever imagined. I learned that I don't need someone else to validate my worth or make me feel complete. I learned that sometimes the best revenge isn't getting angry, it's getting even. 2 years later, I'm running a restaurant empire worth over $15 million. I've been featured in Forbes, Restaurant Business Magazine, and Food and Wine. I've been invited to speak at business conferences about leadership and crisis management. I'm also in a relationship with David, an attorney I met during the divorce proceedings. He's honest, loyal, and treats me like an equal partner. We've been together for 18 months, and is everything Richard pretended to be but never was. Sometimes people ask me if I regret how I handled everything. If I think I was too harsh, too public, too devastating in my response to Richard's betrayal. My answer is always the same. Richard had choices at every step. He chose to have an affair. He chose to steal from our business. He chose to lie to me for over a year. He chose to plan a future with another woman while pretending to love me. I simply chose to make sure he faced the consequences of those choices. The last I heard, Richard was working as a line cook at a chain restaurant in New Jersey. He lost his professional reputation, his business connections, and his financial security. Ashley married someone else and posted photos of her wedding on social media, making sure to block Richard so he couldn't see them. He destroyed his life chasing something he thought was better than what he had, and he lost everything in the process. Do I feel bad about it? Sometimes. I loved Richard once, and seeing anyone fall so far is difficult. But then I remember the text message where he called me naive, where he said deceiving me was easier than he expected, and I remember that he brought this on himself. I also think about all the women who stay silent when they're betrayed, who accept less than they deserve, who let themselves be treated as disposable. I think about the employees who could have lost their jobs if Richard had succeeded in his plan. I think about the investors who trusted us with their money. Sometimes doing the right thing requires being ruthless. Sometimes protecting yourself and the people who depend on you requires destroying the person who's trying to destroy you. That's not revenge. That's justice. The most important lesson I learned from this experience is that your intuition is usually right. When something feels wrong, when someone's behavior doesn't match their words, when you have that nagging feeling that you're being lied to, trust yourself. Don't make excuses for people who don't deserve them. Don't ignore red flags because you want to believe in someone. Don't let yourself be taken advantage of because you're afraid of being alone. I spent too many months doubting myself. Making excuses for Richard's suspicious behavior, convincing myself that I was being paranoid. If I'd trusted my instincts earlier, I could have saved myself months of pain and humiliation. But I also learned that betrayal, as devastating as it is, can be an opportunity. It can show you who you really are when everything you thought you knew about your life turns out to be a lie. It can force you to develop strength you didn't know you had. I'm not the same woman I was 3 years ago. I'm stronger, smarter, more independent. I'm more careful about who I trust, but I'm also more confident in my own judgment. I know what I'm capable of, and I know what I deserve. To anyone watching this who's going through something similar, whether it's infidelity, financial betrayal, or any other form of deception, I want you to know that you're stronger than you think. You don't have to accept being treated badly. You don't have to stay silent to protect someone who's hurting you. Document everything. Build your case. Protect yourself legally and financially. And when you're ready, don't be afraid to fight for what's yours. The truth has a way of coming out eventually. You can either control how and when that happens, or you can let it control you. I chose to control it, and I've never regretted that decision. Richard thought he was smart enough to deceive me indefinitely. He thought I was naive enough to never catch on. He thought I was weak enough to accept whatever he chose to give me. He was wrong on all counts. And now he's living with the consequences of underestimating the woman he promised to love and honor. Justice isn't always pretty, and it isn't always kind. But sometimes it's exactly what someone deserves. This is my story of betrayal, discovery, and ultimately, survival. I hope it helps someone else who's facing the same choice I faced, whether to stay silent or fight back. I chose to fight back, and I won. Thank you for listening to my story. If you've been through something similar, please share your experience in the comments. And remember, you're stronger than you think, and you deserve better than someone who lies to you. Stay strong, stay smart, and never let anyone make you feel like you're not worth fighting for. You are worth fighting for. Never forget that.